And we're back from break, everyone. And how's that for a look, huh? Okay, we're gonna get some spooky music playing for this rules continuation. Hmm, what would be a good one? How about maybe this? All right, and apparently we're gonna get visited by a cat here very shortly. Hi, ma'am. You want to get it out of the way and say hi? Yeah? Are you jealous I'm talking to other people? Is that what this is? Here, you can crawl through. Come on. You know you want to. She's sniffing. Come on. Come on. There we go. She emerges. It is now a complete stream. We have cat butt, everyone. So you should have the cat butt emote available to you. Put it out there in chat, right? Meow, I know. Are you happy now? I gave you a piece of cheese. Yeah? Oh, big stretch. Okay, well. We're going to begin tonight where we kind of left off last night. Now, last night was built on the foundation of that initial approach. What is Vampire the Masquerade? What is its mood? What are the which kinds of stories does it seek to tell or inspire? You know, concepts of horror, concepts of a world like ours, but not quite, hence the world of darkness. Then, on Thursday, we went into the very basic rules. And with this storyteller system, it's pretty easy. You build you build a dice pool of what is appropriate to test whatever is happening. And the dice pool can be made up of whatever you and the storyteller decide it should be. Now, there are common combinations of things, such as Dex athletics to dodge out of the way of something. But maybe in a particular situation, it is more dramatic or appropriate to mix up some other attribute and skill, or set of two attributes, or there's various modifiers because it's raining or because it's not. There might be other rules for a character. Ma'am, are you deliberately just in front of the camera so no one else can see? Are you jealous? You know, if you use a particular power, maybe that has a special dice pool, but it's all the same. They're all dice pools. A single roll, a modified roll, a contested roll. And there was the concept of a critical. When you're rolling d10s in this system, you're just looking for a 6+. So it's a 50% chance that any of your dice will be successful. Now, if you get a 10, that's good. It's a success. It becomes a critical success if you get 2 10s, or rather any pair of 10s will offer you bonus successes. If you roll 2 10s, that is actually 4 successes. If you roll 3 10s, that's 5 successes. And if you roll 4 10s, that's 8 successes. And that means you can do more difficult things, or you can do things with extra panache or expediency. because the margin between what you needed and what you got is so big. You and or your storyteller might have a little bit of a budget to buy some extra fun effects for whatever it is that you did. So it's nice and easy, right? This game is meant to empower storytelling. And not that Pathfinder can't tell a story, or D&D doesn't, or Cyberpunk is somehow completely incapable of telling a story through its mechanics and dice rolls and builds and all this other stuff. But in the world of darkness, where your campaign is known as a chronicle, where the GM isn't just a GM or a DM, but an ST, a storyteller. From the ground up, this is meant for you to tell a tale. Where there are ways of commonly approaching interactions that might require a dice roll, but ultimately, you have the narrative freedom to do whatever you think you can. And then we'll see if the dice can agree. And maybe you win something at a cost. Maybe you fail, and not only do you not do the thing, but something else happens that maybe you can't buy yourself out of, and you roll with it because that's also life. And while we're talking about vampires, life still happens to vampires. So tonight, let's continue that delve into this basic rule system using dice pools of D10s. Because when you're playing vampire, this is your character here. Now, you could look as pretty or grotesque as you wish, but ultimately you got the fangs and you need the blood. Because you are a monster. Maybe you have heroic moments, but ultimately, are you actually a hero in this world? Because you have this to contend with. A beast I am, lest a beast I become. How do you manage your decline? What is this beast that lives within you? Because obviously you have the power to, even as a fledgling vampire, freshly turned, you have superpowers compared to the average Joe or Jane on the street. Nothing really stops you from just tearing into the neck of someone openly. What is someone gonna do? Shoot you? A bullet might hurt, kind of, but you don't need your liver. And if your lung is punctured, that's an inconvenience because it makes it harder to talk when you're manually breathing to squirt air out of your meat. But you don't need your lungs. You don't need your liver. And so, we have that overarching sense, though, of, humans might not want to be feasted upon. And so if you just go around openly tearing open, the kind, the sleepers, the humans of the world of darkness, then the humans, you may be able to get a couple of them and get them really good. But ultimately, the humans are going to rally together. They're actually going to put aside some petty differences they have in whatever religious or political affiliation or income strata or whatever else. And they're going to say there's actually a monster on the streets. And we will all work together to rid ourselves of this monster. And that's why the Masquerade exists in Vampire the Masquerade. Because you kind of don't want that to happen. Where any single one of you could be that walking breach that ruins it for everyone else. And it's a weird mix because you are excruciatingly isolated and alone Hey, man. And yet you have to work together because any single one of you, well, you may need lungs to breathe, Hero Dragon, but if you're a vampire, you don't. Um, but any single one of you, whether they're a member of your pack or coterie, whether they're your primogen or a member of the court high up, let alone a freshly turned vampire not understanding, what is happening with my body, and I have fangs where I had none before. Very interesting kind of a second puberty going on. Because there is this beast. As soon as you turn, you may not look grizzled and gnarled. You may not necessarily manifest right out of the... Oh. You may not necessarily manifest straight out of the earth, the coffin, the bed you were left in when you were embraced, whatever. Looking like this. You might, depending. But you are no longer human, no matter how much you remember your human life and you look like a human, but you ain't. And how do you come to terms with that? How do you come to grips with that? And how can this tabletop role-playing game encourage this riddle, or have you ask that question, or make sure that in a world where these super powered vampires walk among us, what keeps them in check? And it is that fear ultimately that the humans can always just rise up and smite them, and that they can even smite each other. And so there needs to be a distraction, something that maybe not even just hobbles, because it arguably empowers, and that's the scary part. And that is this beast. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourneth among you eat blood. For it is the life of all flesh, the blood is the life thereof. Now, there's a very good role-playing part where you might go, so, I have an understanding of vampires, but do all vampires in the world of darkness, can they cross moving water? Must they pick up and count seeds in their path? Do they need permission to enter a house? Are they repelled by garlic? Are they immortal? And here are some considerations for that. There are always exceptions to the rule, and this is good to go over, because within these concepts, you can flesh out your vampire. But I'm not too worried about this. I'm going to trust that you will go to your friendly local game store, you will buy a copy of this book, and if you need help getting a copy of it, I know a guy at an FLGS who'd be happy to work with you to get a book out to you. But for all of this immortality and turning into bats, controlling wolves, you have superpowers, like a very overtly supernatural, or just you get super strength. There is this. The hunger. I don't think the music is necessarily going to back up what we're talking about here. We'll try this. Part appetite, part lust, and part addiction, hunger gives voice to the blood and claws to the beast, capital B, beast. It calls to vampires constantly, whispering and screaming of needs, urges, and desires. Every vampire awakens to hunger and must kill to silence it. The kindred, remember that's a different name for the vampires in the setting. The kindred pay for their immortality and their powers in hunger, and the bill is always coming due. In Vampire the Masquerade, all vampires have a unique trait, hunger, measured in levels ranging from 0 to 5. A vampire with a hunger of 0 is sated and satisfied, whereas a vampire with a hunger of 5 is ravenous and can barely think of anything except their next drink. For each level of hunger affecting a vampire character, they gain 1 hunger die. Hunger dice are 10-sided, just like regular dice, but should be a different color than regular dice, so players can easily spot them in a pool. We suggest red. When a player builds a dice pool for a vampire character, they exchange regular dice from that pool for hunger dice on a 1-for-1 basis. If the dice pool for the roll is lower than the character's hunger, simply roll a number of hunger dice equal to the dice pool. Example: Erica wants to check a crime scene for clues. The storyteller tells her to build a pool of intelligence plus investigation. She has 3 in both traits, so her dice pool is 6. Erica has hunger 2, so she removes 2 dice from her pool and adds 2 hunger dice to it. Her dice pool is still 6 dice, but 2 of the dice in the pool are hunger dice. So if we're working with black and red dice, black dice being just these normal dice you build from your attributes and or your skills. And Alien RPG had something similar with stress. You had base dice and stress dice. Here you have kind of this base dice, right? But then you have your hunger dice. And it is recommended to keep them separate somehow. Whether by color, or you use the 1s of a percentile set for your base dice, and the actual 10s for your hunger. However you can differentiate it, because it is important. Because as you cast those bones, your hunger might come into play with something you're trying to do. The exception, characters never include hunger dice in checks, willpower, or humanity dice pools. Hunger dice function as regular dice in tests and contests, scoring successes on a 6 or higher. Hunger dice cannot be re-rolled by using willpower, however, as the hunger makes a mockery of the rational mind's attempt to tame it. In addition, rolling a 0, which would be a 10 on most dice, or 1 on a hunger die carries additional consequences. Messy criticals and bestial failures. So we talked about the general concept of a critical success. As a vampire who carries hunger, you have this extra consideration. So here we go, using the vampire dice, hunger dice. Now on the special branded dice, the 1 has this skull. Failure. Bestial failure if the test fails. 2 to 5 is regular failure. 6 to 9 is a normal success. And then we have a success with fangs. Remember, normally it's stars. In this case, we have fangs. Success. A messy critical if part of a critical win. And remember, hunger dice can never be re-rolled using willpower. So here's an example, all right? I don't want you to look at this and go, oh, wait, I got to memorize all... Hold on, it's fine. The concepts are the same. We're taking one step beyond it. We're not going super far out on a limb. If you have the concept of the dice pool there in mind, this is a modification to the dice pool. Mary, who has a dice pool of 4 and a hunger of 2, rolls 3 failures and a success against a difficulty of 3. Now remember, that symbol, this works in pairs. So you would need 2 of those in order to get 4. 1 does not make 2. 1 is 1. 2 is 4. 3 is 5. 4 is 8. Anyway. So if we didn't have to worry about hunger dice, this would be 1 success, right? Though Mary's a vampire and does suffer from hunger. With only 1 success, the roll is a bestial failure. Mary can't re-roll the hunger dice, and re-rolling the 2 regular dice could never get her to the 3 successes she needs. Mary prepares to play out her Toreador clan compulsion for the rest of the scene. What is that? Well, don't worry. Don't just... We see the results and we know that that is a bestial failure. It is a bestial failure because the test failed. Mary needed 3 successes. She did get 1. However, 1, or in this case more, of her hunger dice landed on a 1. So yes, she failed the test, but the hunger can be blamed. And so she has a bestial failure. Freya, who has a dice pool of 7, 3 of which is hunger, rolls two hunger ones, 3 failures, and 2 successes. Though, oh, wait a minute, 2 stars and 2 fangs. Huh. How do we interpret this? Well, if you remember, Freya was involved in a fight inside of a church from last night. So Freya rolls that result in a brawling test against an opponent's 6 successes. The critical success nets 4 successes, but is still not enough to win the test. So in this case, it's a contest, right? So she is facing a bestial failure because she did get a 1. Now, in this case, it was 2 ones, but all you need is 1. So she is facing a bestial failure. Freya uses willpower to re-roll the regular failures, hoping to score the 2 successes she needs to bring the result to 6 and a messy critical win. But alas, the dice come up with 2 failures and 1 success. Only 1 more success. Not enough to save her from the bestial failure. Freya narrates how her character jumps her opponent and heedlessly grapples him, intending to snap his head in a sudden rage. She fails to spot his gun, and he gets a shot off in her face, causing her to suffer a point of aggravated damage, as she is burnt by the muzzle flash, and throwing her to the ground. Okay. So we've seen just a static number test, and we've seen how it can work in a contest, and not only in a contest, but mixed between a bestial failure and a messy critical. Okay. Now let's take a look at Martin, okay? Martin's character, who has a dice pool of 6, a hunger of 2, tries to seduce a skeptical mortal. In this case, difficulty 5. He rolls 3 failures, 3 successes. However, if you look here where I highlighted, those would be 10s. A 10 on a normal die and a 10 on a hunger die. Which means 5 successes. 4 for the critical, and 1 for the additional. However, the presence of these fangs, of the critical on the hunger die, turns the critical win into a messy critical. Martin has a hard choice to make. Does he really want to take the mortal home at the price of dealing with the mess of a masquerade breach? Or a stain caused by a pickup gone bad? A stain is something you would test against in order to see if you lose humanity. Pardon. He can't re-roll the hunger dice with willpower. However, he can use willpower to push down his urges and re-roll up to 3 regular dice. Pardon me if I'm a little hiccupy or a little gurgly. Maybe I'm suffering from hunger too. One moment. That way I don't have any sort of, by sating myself, I don't have any particular failures as I'm broadcasting to you all. So he does, re-rolling the critical and 2 of the failures, hoping he doesn't get another like a 10, right, on the normal die. And perhaps that he is still successful in his pickup. The re-rolled dice come up with a failure, success, and success. 2 successes. This makes his whole roll at the end 2 failures, 3 successes, well, technically 4 successes, and that one was threatening a messy crit. So, in total, 4 successes and no critical, messy or otherwise. The storyteller asks if he wants to win at a cost. Remember, difficulty 5. And, if it's appropriate, and you have at least 1 success, you and or the storyteller might be able to negotiate some sort of a deal. If the storyteller gives you that one last success you are hoping for, are you willing to pay a price for it? He describes how he pushes his predatory nature back, spending a long night carefully seeking mutual consent, bearing his human side. Finally, the guy follows him home, but Martin's character has missed the chance to do anything else for the night. He wins at a cost of time, but at least he has not stained his soul nor endangered the Masquerade. Good morning to you, Clicker. Thank you for joining us. And so if you're wondering, so why would he want to roll out of a messy critical? And sometimes you don't, because sometimes maybe you don't care, or the opportunity presents itself where you can't bleed off that extra energy by just simply taking your time. Because in this system, there is an overarching concept of you are always the small fish in a big pond. You might have a dice pool of 7 or 8 if you mix brawling with strength. But there could always be that threat of someone with a 10 in their dice pool, or specialties to bring it up to 11, or disciplines, or blood buffs, or just plain old, you messed with the wrong person in a narrative capacity. And if you breach the Masquerade, that can be a problem, not just for yourself, but for every other vampire. And people who breach the vampire's kindred who breach the Masquerade are often dealt with harshly. And one of the reasons being, there can always be more vampires made. But if you can't handle your vampirism, if you endanger the other kindred, you may be destroyed. And in this case, Martin realizes this. Says, I came close to ripping out this guy's throat in an act of seduction gone wrong, right? In order to try and sate that hunger. Not just so that you carry around the one that you almost always normally do. But if you actually kill someone by draining them, you get to go to 0 hunger. Ooh, isn't that nice? You don't get that itch. The beast has been filled and is sleeping for a little bit anyway. But Martin doesn't want a blood hunt called on him. Well, Martin's character doesn't want to threaten or like have to clean up, or even just out of convenience. Everything else might be fine, but didn't want to clean up the mess. And so he actually rolled out of that critical and was willing to take the win at a cost because it actually saved his character's hide. Because if you become known as a Masquerade breacher, you owe people favors that you might be repaying for a long time, or you are such a small thing in the grand scheme of vampiric society, no one's gonna miss you. Bye-bye. And you are disposed of. And will anyone weep? Your sire may or may not, and go, well, I mean, I'm embarrassed because that was my childer that just got dusted for breaching the Masquerade. But I can always just make another one. So hopefully this is making sense, right? We have the idea, that core idea, you make your dice pool, and if you have hunger, how much? Replace a certain number of dice in your dice pool with hunger and roll it. And if you fail the test and get a 1 or several 1s on your hunger dice, then that is a bestial failure. You fall for some sort of compulsion, or your behavior is modified as the beast grows closer and starts taking over. Maybe is distracting you, or you take a penalty on things because you're distracted trying to fight it back. Or in that moment, in that rush, your vitae is pumping as you get closer to seducing this person. And whereas you just wanted to put a tactful smooch on a chin in order to try and skillfully seduce this person, that beast pushes your fangs out because it thinks it's getting fed. And you have to go, no, and your fangs withdraw back up into your face. I hope this makes sense. We can try and simulate this. We can try pushing a couple dice rolls on things as well on Roll20 and see if we can force something to happen. But these are ways, these are types of criticals that add roleplay opportunity to the story that you can lean into or act as a boundary in which you can operate, and you can breach it, or you can try and bounce around and stay within it. So, a messy critical. A critical win in which one or more 10s appear on a hunger die is a messy critical. The character succeeds as in a regular critical, but like an animal would, not a being capable of foresight or self-control. The beast scored the critical, perhaps, not you. Example, your hunger has driven you to greater than normal performance at the cost of control. Uh-oh. Hang on, we're getting a raid, everyone. There we go. Duragrex, thank you for coming over to the Hero Zone tonight. We are continuing our review of the mechanics, the dice rolling, involved in Vampire the Masquerade. And how was your Halls of Torment session? And thank you for bringing over your crew to come see us. Have a seat at our virtual tabletops as we're in this digital version of a friendly local game store exploring a tabletop role-playing game. It was tormenting for sure. I'm glad it lives up to its name. Chris Andrew, Duromania, Mortal Crux, of course, and then did I miss someone else? Clicker, yeah, I said good morning to you, Clicker. I'm sorry, I might have gotten a little distracted and missed things here. DQ also, welcome back to you. Now, Durogrex, as you do play various RPGs, have you played Vampire the Masquerade in tabletop form or in video game form? So here's the example. Your hunger has driven you to greater than normal performance at the cost of control. You killed the bouncer, but you clearly snapped his spine or tore out his throat. You opened the door by pulling it off its hinges. You found the right book and tore the rest of the bookcase down in your exaltation. You eluded the guards by biting out the throat of the one who saw you before he could cry out, leaving a very informative corpse in your path. Those are examples of messy criticals. You succeeded, but it wasn't very graceful. How does it compare to, by Ravenloft, I presume, Chris, that you mean D&D? Or Call of Cthulhu. So Call of Cthulhu is a percentile-based system. And The stats and rolling is a little bit different. And for Ravenloft, which is more of the vampiric horror setting for Dungeons and Dragons, D20 based system, there might be some special considerations that you play with if you're going through something like Curse of Strahd in D&D. Ultimately, Chris, the system excels at stories of close horror, personal horror, a lot of street level stuff that goes on. Now, I say street level, but even a fledgling vampire is mighty compared to the human they once were, and many other humans. And so it is a system that allows for a great exploration of the fun, the parody, the cynicism, the suspicion, the occult in our real life, as you might explore a city where you live or is close to you, and you find out it's actually run by monsters. And in fact, in this game, you play as the monsters. You play as the vampires who are trying to manage their continued existence into undeath, of not being discovered by the humans, which in individually or in small groups you can very clearly dispatch. But if humanity at large ever found out that you exist, can you imagine how much that would shake up a lot of things? And you might have religious or political groups very literally gunning for you. You might have very apolitical and atheistic scientific foundations and universities trying to capture you to study, to vivisect, though that word is a bit oxymoronically applied to a vampire. Or that you threaten the rest of your kindred if you mess up. And it can be difficult to do because as a vampire, you are capable of so much more than an average human. And so if you do something like what we're getting into here, where instead of opening the locked door, you rip it off its hinges very easily, how are you going to cover that up? Explain it. How are you going to work with the fact that your prodigious strength just did something incredible, but that alerts the mortals that, that boy ain't right. So there are elements of Eldritch horror in Vampire, such as you'd find in Call of Cthulhu. A lot of conspiratorial stuff, cult stuff, shadowy organizations, elder beings. And you can have a sense of adventure similar to what you'd find in a Ravenloft setting in Dungeons and Dragons. It's really up to the story that you want to tell. Where a lot of D&D games are that, there's always adventure on the horizon, and we're the good guys, and we go out and fight evil and throw down gods by the end and everything. Which is fine. I'm not saying that necessarily in a critical sense. That's the tendency of D&D games. The tendency of Call of Cthulhu is you start out as a normal person who starts slowly getting pulled into something that's greater than they, and by the end, you might be lucky not to be in a mental ward somewhere, or just straight up dead, or consumed, soul and body alike, by whatever this entity is. If not just losing your complete faith in humanity. Vampire might fall a little bit in between. And in fact, with the game that we finished part 1 on Tuesday, part 2 and part 3 will be the next 2 Tuesdays. We have we actually introduced kind of those more fantastic elements in an area where the vampires ended up. We're playing in Cleveland, Ohio, in July of 2023, and yet this exists. And even to a vampire who's been living as a vampire for maybe only a couple years, this is still shocking. This is still something you have to come to terms with. Is you realize that, well, you ain't human anymore. No matter how much you look like it, no matter how much you pretend, you aren't human. And how are you going to handle that when you subsist off of humans and must coexist with them? Sierra Echo says, high explosives can hide a myriad of sins, and that's why I don't get asked to play VTM anymore. So you can have a lot of fun street level stuff where you're exploring your local myths and legends, urban legends and everything, or you can take it into the realm of the dreaded and fantastic. The storyteller and the player work together to decide on the level of success and the level of mess. By and large, they scale upward together. The following are results from a good, meaty mess. The character gains one or more stains from their monstrous action. The character breaches the Masquerade, as they visibly demonstrate supernatural strength or speed, or leave gaping bite wounds in a body. And remember, these are all suggestions. Flavor this however you think is best for your story at your table with your players. The character loses 1 dot from an advantage. For example, you might have totaled your Bugatti, squandering resources, crippled a retainer, offended an ally, or just lost status in court following your outburst. Although the character still needs to spend time in a later scene or in the background to take action to repair the dot, the storyteller can allow the loss to recover more quickly than other vanished dots. Or, if none of the above conditions fit the narrative, such as on stealth or awareness tests, the character must act out a compulsion, see below, or the test fails completely as the beast clouds their senses. An example. Wanda scores a messy critical when using the precognition power. As she gains the information she looks for with startling clarity, the vision is cut short by a glimpse of herself indulging her most bestial urges, and she receives 1 stain. And in that regard, why would she be stained by watching herself in her own mind, doing something so taboo or forbidden, for giving into the beast within her? Because in that moment, she may as well have been. On all manners, emotional, logical, she embraced and participated actively in that moment. So, did she rip a door off its handles? Did she tear the throat out of someone? No. But whatever she was doing in that vision was enough that she entertained doing something so horrendous that she might have actually come close to justifying it, thus putting a stain on her, and she'd have to resolve that later. Alright, a bestial failure. A failed roll, not enough successes to reach the difficulty or to beat an opposing contestant's number of successes, in which 1 or more hunger dice come up a 1, is a bestial failure. Either the character failed because their beast manifested inopportunely or excessively, or the character's failure angered their beast into manifesting inopportunely or excessively. The following are good results from a bestial failure. The character must act out a compulsion as the blood starts to subtly dictate their actions. For players new to the game or troops that want their characters less prone to acting on urges, you can choose one of the options below instead. The character loses a dot in an advantage, as on a messy critical. Character suffers one or more points of aggravated health damage. This result works well for bestial failures on resistance rolls, as the character breaks out in bloody sweat from the stress. Right? You have this inner beast, and you're straining. Your undead muscles are tearing themselves apart as you're clenched. No, because if you stay locked up, then you can't lash out, but at the cost of your bodily health. If no one in the troop can come up with a good idea, the hunger increases by 1. If this result would take their hunger above 5, the character immediately rolls to resist hunger frenzy at difficulty 4. Remember, if your roll succeeds anyway, you can't get a bestial failure no matter how many hunger dice come up 1s. Oh, hi. Meow, I know. Are you hungry? You are? Oh. And what would you like to eat? Ma'am? Ma'am? What are you contemplating? Yeah? Here. You can have this instead. There we go. Oh, good scritchins. Right there. Compulsions occur on a bestial failure as the hunger subtly urges a vampire into actions dictated by their blood, sometimes even instilling traits hailing from their clan's founder. When a character must take a compulsion, the storyteller chooses one or randomly determines one by rolling on the table below. Try to vary the compulsions rather than leaning into the clan compulsion each time, unless you enjoy stereotype overgrowth. Once chosen, the player decides how best to act it out. Reward players who go above and beyond to play into their compulsion by allowing them to restore a willpower point. Note that, unlike Frenzy, players cannot spend willpower to ignore the effects of a compulsion. These insidious urges compel behavior that feels utterly natural. The vampire may never realize they were influenced. So here are some samples. These basic compulsions form the core of the vampire personality. Storytellers should feel free to create custom compulsions based on their own notions of vampiric dysfunction or on the specific failure modes of their player character base. Hunger. The archetypal compulsion. With hunger, the vampire's thoughts inexorably stray toward the rush of sinking their fangs in prey and hot blood washing over their tongue. The vampire will do anything to slake their hunger, whether that means violence, subterfuge, or outright begging. They perform any action not immediately conducive to feeding at a 2 dice penalty to their pools. This compulsion ends when the vampire slakes at least 1 hunger level. Here are some examples. I urge you to get the book, read through it. I'm not going to go over everything. Dominance. Sometimes you just got to T-pose on someone to feel better, right? If you're a vampire, you don't get to mark your territory in the way that other animals traditionally do. So what must you do otherwise? Some kind of jockeying. Cause harm. Paranoia sets in. And each of the clans has a particular compulsion that will manifest within them due to a pervasive nature of their bloodline. that has helped to shape them. For example, for the Nosferatu, the need to know permeates the vampire. They become consumed with a hunger for secrets, to know that which few or no one knows, almost as strong as that for blood. They also refuse to share secrets with others, except in strict trade for greater ones. All actions not spent working toward learning a secret, no matter how big or small, receive a 2 dice penalty. The compulsion ends when the vampire learns a secret big enough to be considered useful. Sharing the secret is optional. So for a short time, if you suffer from the beast taking over, either from a bestial failure or a messy critical, this might influence the role-playing of the player piloting the character suffering from the compulsion. And this is why, everyone, this is why I strongly urge you all to stay as well-fed as possible. Because the hungrier you are, the more likely you are to succumb to the beast within you. Rolling 1 hunger die in almost everything you do isn't terrible and might be more easily ablated through the use of willpower and rerolling. But if you're in a marathon setting where blood's tougher to come by for one reason or another, or you're getting out of a fight and you needed to spend your blood to heal and buff yourself, this is resource management. And you find yourself with 4 hunger, that's 4 red dice in your dice pool that can have you getting closer and closer to tipping over that edge. I think what I'll do is this section, because we talked about the hunger. We talked about what it can do to affect the dice pools that we make. This segment I will end here. Let's get up and take a quick break, walk around, get a snack if you need to, and then when we come back, we can talk about some other tests. So, arousing the blood for various things. For example, for Blush of Life. How do you slake your hunger, etc., etc. We can get into these other rules or considerations, and if not rules, then roles. RULES or ROLLS. And get a we'll continue that slow zoom out of our understanding of the system, or how we want to manipulate it, things we want to embrace or things we wish to ignore about it. So give me about 5 minutes, because it looks like I need to slake my thirst anyway, as I am almost out. I have but a drop. Now I'm in trouble. So I'll see you back in 5 minutes or so.